and the push is not enough. It's only enough to overcome that friction, which isn't very much. I mean, I got that knob a little bit too tight. You have to fiddle around with that knob back there and get it to where it's just right for the person sitting in it. Okay, and then you sit here, and it should, like I say, when the boat heels, you should have enough weight to where the chair comes level. If it doesn't come quite level, it's because you haven't had quite enough force to overcome that little bit of existing friction. So then somebody's going to have to give you a little nudge. Okay, I think I've covered everything.
Okay.
Oh, here's that other washer. I'll
All
put
right.
that back in there.
All right.
This is where we first put the seat. This is where we first decided it needed to be because we didn't think we could put it behind the wheel. So we put it here, and my shed takes up a lot of room in the cockpit. So then, it's my fault for doing this. I said, I think we can put that chair behind the wheel. So I made a mount, we put it behind the wheel, and there just wasn't enough room between the person's knees and the wheel for that to work. Plus the transfer was difficult. So we decided that wasn't going to work. And we have a couple other ideas to resolve these issues. And all that's in process right now. And hopefully we'll come up with a solution. But in the meantime, I want you to use the chair. And everybody might think, gee, it's great, let's don't do anything. So I think we need a few trips with a few people in the chair and a few people to see how this works. Because the sailing experience, I don't think is any different when you're sitting here than when you're sitting in the back. Now the one problem it is you do have when you sit in front is you don't know where the rudder is. And on Tashi, of course you can't see the rudder, but on Tashi you can see the wheel. So if you paid attention, I'm going to show you in a minute the problem. If you paid attention, you could see where the wheel was and that told you where the rudder was. And that's not a problem for an able-bodied person because the wheel, when you turn the wheel halfway around, it turns the rudder about 30 degrees. When you turn another quarter of a turn, it turns about at 45 degrees, the quadrant comes against a hard stop. So the able-bodied person saying it will feel that hard stop and won't try and go any further. However, if you're using the joystick, then you have a potential problem. And let me show you what that potential problem is. The way that joystick works, this is the wheel on the back of the steering. This is not the same wheel, but it's a wheel like this. And around that wheel is a timing belt. So this wheel actually has teeth in it. So the timing belt wraps around that wheel. And that timing belt hooks onto the motor. So the motor turns that timing belt, and that's what turns the wheel. So if you can't see where the rudder is, you've got the danger. Okay, hand me my paper wheel down there. Okay, normally you would see the wheel and you see the marking on top, knowing the wheel is in the top. Then as you start to turn the wheel, you get to where that's in the bottom. And even if you can see the wheel, you really don't know at that point which way to go. If you continue going in that direction, this direction you were going, pretty soon the quadrant's going to come to a stop. It's going to come to a stop when this is up about like this. 2/3, 3/4 of a revolution. The problem with that is, if you've got your finger on the control, the joystick, you don't know when it hits that stop. So it's going to go around. It wants to do what you want to do. It's going to keep turning around until the quadrant hits that stop. And then one of several things is going to happen. And I don't know which of those is going to happen. But you can see there's not a lot of teeth that are gauging this pulley. So when this stops out here, what you might find is the motor is just going to click inside of that pulley. There's a clutch on here that tightens this up and down. You're going to find that motor might just spin inside of that belt. What you also might find is that it's tight enough to where it stops the motor. And a motor wants to keep its user happy. It wants to keep going. So when it stalls like that, then it starts to draw more current to try and do what you want it to do. And it keeps drawing more current until one of about 3 things happens. Either it trips a circuit breaker, which is good, or it starts to burn up either the wire going to the motor or the motor itself. So I'm curious about that. So I clamped this motor down on my bench at home, And I put a clamp on it so I could continue to put more drag on that, simulating what would happen if you got a situation. And put my amp meter. What I noticed at about 15 amps or so, the wire going just started to smoke. And I didn't keep my applying pressure to it because I don't want to burn anything up. But that's not a good situation when the motor gets hot or the wire gets hot. So I'm not sure which of those four things will happen. Now the way to prevent that, two things. One of, I've got to see what current this draws at a maximum load when you're sailing, which is probably when you've got a certain amount of weather helm. So I got to sail a boat for a number of reasons. I'm going to hook up my ammeter and see how much current this draws, and try and set a fuse in there so that the fuse will trip before the wire burns up. Now the other thing that we need to do, we need to find a way so that the person can avoid that problem. If we put the chair in front of the wheel, like obviously you can't see the wheel. So if that's where we decide to leave, the solution to that is to get a rudder indicator. And that's a gauge that swings 45 degrees left and 40. So you always know where the rudder is, hooked up to the rudder, not to the steering thing. Now in the meantime, what you need to do, because you're not going to know when you get halfway. When you're halfway down, you could go this way or this way. If you go back the way you were coming from, that's fine. If you go the other way and keep going, then you're running a problem where the quadrant bottoms out and something's going to happen to the motor or the cable. So since you can't see this, I think, and the only time this is really a problem, if you're just sailing along, you're only moving, 5 or 10 degrees one way, that's no problem. The problem is when you tack. Because when you tack, and I've never paid much attention when I tack, how much I turn the wheel. Do I turn it all the way around? Do I turn it 30 degrees? I don't know what it takes to tack. If you just turn it and keep turning and turning and turning because you want to tack faster and faster, sooner or later you can run to that stop. So what you need to do until we resolve this, either move this chair so you can see the wheel or get a rudder. You need to have a spotter. So when you tack, somebody needs to, now there ought to be somebody behind the wheel at all times when you're somebody off to the side. So when you tack, then that person needs to watch and see what, and if the wheel gets much more than past the bottom, they need to tell you to stop it before you crash the motor. And so that's one place where it can happen when you're tacking. It can also happen when you're leaving the dock, where you want full rudder when you're leaving the dock. My suggestion to avoid that is let somebody, able-bodied person, get the boat out of the dock so they can feel when that rudder bottoms out. The third time happen if you stall. You got absolutely no wind and you're out there and the wind dies and you want to go to the left. So you keep turning the wheel, turn it more and more to the left, more and more to the left. The boat doesn't move. The boat won't move because it's stalled. So you can turn that rudder as much as you want when the boat's stalled and you're not going to turn. So again, somebody needs to watch that. If you're stalled and the person starts cranking that wheel over, you need to make sure they don't go past the 270 degree angle and crash that rudder. You need to tell them to go back the other way. So I think the solution to that, at least for now, is to have a spotter there. And the spotter needs to see when you're making a turn that might cause that rudder to go too far. And then the final thing is the joystick. And the joystick plugs into this nice little connector back. But this connector has a cover on it. And when I came here, the cover was dangling down like that. And it very well could have been that I left it like that, but so I can't reprimand myself, but you want to make sure that cover is put back on there. Then this joystick also has a cover on it, but you put this below, so no matter. So this plugs in here, and you have to get that keyway just right. And you have to push it in a little bit, and then tighten this up. And then the two arms that you had on Tosh are the same arms as here, so you can mount this rudder underneath these arms out here. You have to make sure that it's only going to go on, that this is, if you face it backwards, then it's running backwards. So you need to make sure that this faces forward. And if it's wrong, then you'll figure it out pretty fast. Maybe you can compensate for that, and maybe you can. And this is it. So that slides on that arm, which could be the same as you had on Toshi. A little bit different connector back here. Okay, so I think that should get you started. I really encourage all of you to sail this boat as many times as you can, because I think the decision on how it works with the seat in front of the wheel, if the seat in front of the wheel is absolutely disastrous, then we definitely need to do something different. But if the seat in the wheel is kind of okay, everybody's comfortable with it, understanding that you're going to get that rudder indicator at some point, then the simplest thing, since it's done now, is to leave the seat in front of the wheel. Anything else is going to take some effort, but you're willing to make the effort. And then that friction thing, you're just going to have to learn how to work that. So, happy sailing.